The legend of Naddaha, the return. My village, finally. My kind old village where I spent my childhood and adolescence before moving to Cairo to study medicine and live there. Nothing has changed. The mud houses, the water wheel, the mosque with its crumbling walls, the stagnant canal, the leaning palm tree over the wall of the kutab, the barefoot children playing their primitive games with mucus dripping from their noses. I was in a taxi, one of those old cars only good for dumping their miserable peasant passengers into the canal. My car couldn't handle this rough road, so I left it in Cairo. A suspicious old peasant sat beside me, his lips trembling with Quranic verses the entire time. Every few minutes he shouted at the driver, "Take it easy, Saleh. Is the world ending?" The driver laughed coarsely and raised his voice in a hoarse song. Car cassette players weren't common back then, fortunately. The car sped up even more. Along the sides of the road, the peasants stopped working in their fields to see what was happening, squinting from the dust and sweat, asserting their divine right to interfere in what doesn't concern them, until one of them said with obvious cleverness, "That's Saleh. So he's back then." And they resumed their work while the old man continued reciting the Quran. My village, finally. It is one of the villages of Sharqiya Governorate. A short distance from Fakus, and its name is Kafr Abad. Do you know this name? I don't think so. Will you remember it? I don't think so. It's just another one of those similar names that our kind countryside is full of, known and cared about only by the children of its villages. From this small village I became one of the most respected hematology professors, a welcomed member in every scientific forum in the world, and a friend to every blood specialist on earth. This is not arrogance, but an acknowledgement of this poor village's favour upon me. And today I return after a long absence, feeling like a plant in need of its roots. The curious gazes of the children followed me, and the pretty teenage girls stole glances, then nudged each other playfully and coyly. Almost no one remembered me. Almost no one. I reached our home, the loving house where I had lived my best days. Like most village homes, it was made of soft mud. A bench at the entrance, above it a cracked kerosene lamp, then the huge wooden door in the yard where ducks and chickens played, amusing themselves by picking insects from the slippery, muddy ground. A room to the right of the entrance, the old oven, then haphazardly carved muddy steps leading to the upper floor, where the rooftop held stacks of hay and discs of dried cow dung set out to dry. Next to them was my room. Of course, electricity had not yet reached my village at that time. At the door, I cleared my throat and entered, casting a glance at the little goat that stared at me in surprise. An old woman sat with a large copper bowl of rice in front of her, sifting it. Beside her was a beautiful young woman busy cleaning a completely naked small child. The old woman lifted her withered eyes and saw me. "My son, Rifat!" "Mother!" I threw myself into her arms and kissed her hands eagerly, those familiar, beloved hands. The young woman began hugging me from behind, teary-eyed, her hands still wet. My brother. Such tenderness, such gentleness. Never in my life had I received kisses so sincere and free of charge from any woman except my mother and my sister. No one had ever cried honestly at the sight of me except those two dear ones. But I had never realized before that moment how poor and miserable their condition was. These surroundings had always seemed like a natural truth to me, but my time away made me realize that I owed them more material care. Now I could build them a brick house and provide them with much comfort they truly deserved. But something in my mother's eyes made me hesitate to bring it up. Her excessive sensitivity wouldn't see my suggestion as an act of kindness, but as a kind of condescension toward my roots. The idea that I lived alone in Cairo and travelled abroad frequently never left her mind, and she held an unshakable belief that I must have changed. She was waiting for the first hint of that change to have her heart broken. Yes, this conversation should be postponed for now. Unfortunately, my return was a disaster for the household birds, a bloody massacre carried out by my sister, and a lavish feast was prepared for me while my mother managed the operation like a general in a war who knows exactly how to win it. God rest her soul, how brave and energetic she was. I sat like Harun al-Rashid at the floor table, surrounded by piles of thin bread, meat, yogurt, bread and pastries. I realized I had to devour it all down to the last bite, or else the hearts of these two dear ones would break. And my mother, like every Egyptian mother, believed her son's health was never quite right any time she saw him, and believed food was the only reliable sign of health. She also, of course, thought I had delayed marriage to a terrifying extent. How I wish I could be reassured about you with your wife. She'll know how to take care of your health and meals. Oh, what a painful blessing that is. At the time, I had already begun to feel lonely, that instinct that arises when one starts to wish to become 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. My heart was no different from that of the doorman, the plumber, or the newspaper vendor. That urgent need for a companion, someone waiting for you at night when you return and seeing you off in the morning when you leave. God rest your soul, Mother. What if you had known? And what if I had known that I would reach 66 alone? I never expected to witness all that I did, that I would spend the prime of my life among vampires and monsters, with no time or emotional space left to find a kind girl to share my life with. I swallowed the piece of meat I was chewing and mumbled, God will make it easy. And I looked at her kind, gentle face. What if she had known what I went through in England and in Romania? If she had known, she would have died from fear, and she would have sworn never to let me leave her side until one of us died. I reached out and stroked the chin of the naked child, my nephew, and asked, How is Talat, your husband, Rifa? He's fine. He'll be back tonight. I dipped my bite into the cream, tossed it into my mouth, and continued checking in. And what about Raider? Raider, if you don't know, is my brother, a farmer who chose to stay and tend our land in the village. He lived with his wife on the other side of the town because his short-tempered, haughty wife didn't want to live with my mother and sister. Minutes passed before I realized that neither of them had answered my question. I said, How is Raider? A vacant look in my mother's eyes, and a frozen tear in my sister's as she tried to avoid the question by busying herself feeding her child. What happened? Mother, what happened? My mother found she had no choice but to answer my question. She looked into my eyes and whispered, May God protect him and watch over him. What? Is he sick? Is he in trouble? Did something happen with Nagat, his wife? Don't accuse anyone, my son. It's God's will. Then what happened? My sister lifted her son off her lap and whispered, Rida, the Naddaha called him. A new legend. The Naddaha, oh, the memories this word stirs in me. My grandmother's stories to us by the oven when we were just little kids, listening to her tales with wide eyes and open mouths. The story of that beautiful young woman who walks through the fields at night, calling out to young men, of course, to follow her. The young man rushes into her arms, and there she reveals her true form, a terrifying, ferocious ghoul that devours the boy, never to be heard from again. How many times we were terrified by that story. How often we imagined its gruesome details in hundreds of horrifying scenes. And still, after all these years, I remember my grandmother's rough, low voice repeating sorrowfully that folk chant, Where's the boy, Mama? He left the town when she said he forgot his folks. The ghoul called to him, Where's the boy, children? They said the boy's bewitched. He followed her to strange lands, and the years go by. What a story. And today it returns from the back chambers of my brain, and strangely it returns now and about my brother of all people. Do you mean the Naddaha? Yes, the Naddaha, the woman who calls to young men, and yes, the finest of them all. I threw the piece of bread in my hand onto the floor table and stood up angrily. What do you mean by this nonsense? My mother said with tearful eyes. I swear by it. But there's no such thing. There is. There is, my son. There is. Have you forgotten your grandmother's words, or has living in Cairo made you forget everything? Oh, that painful blessing I once feared. Again, my mother reminds me that I have surely changed, that I now think I'm better and wiser than all the beliefs of my family, which of course isn't true. I don't have to keep believing in ghouls, the Naddaha and monsters, just to prove to them I haven't changed. Fine, how did she call him? She called him. That's it. And him. Is he around or what? Has he disappeared? He's in his house, but he's changed. He no longer speaks to anyone. He doesn't eat or drink, but that doesn't mean anything. He's waiting for her second call to follow her forever. What madness. The nonsense that haunts me in England and Romania follows me even here in my village, where I thought I'd find some peace of mind. I must investigate the matter calmly, without losing my temper. I must not allow myself to yell at these two poor women. Fine, I said it in resignation, then added, I want to see him. Is that at least allowed? I went to my brother's house, made of red brick, and on its door were red palm prints to ward off envy, along with phrases meant to repel the jealous. I knocked firmly. The door opened to my brother's wife with her stern, haughty face. The moment she saw me, she forced a stiff smile on her lips and greeted me coolly. Welcome, Doctor. Thank God for your safe return. She led me inside, and there were 3 children playing in the courtyard. They stopped and stared at me with wide, curious eyes. Come on, kids, say hello to your uncle. 2 small hands reached out to shake mine, while the 3rd child cowered shyly in fear, despite his mother's scolding. I mumbled some compliments about how the children had grown and how charming they were, then followed her to the bedroom. There, on the bed, sat my brother Reda, hunched over himself. Night had begun to fall, making it hard to see clearly. Reda, your brother Dr. Rifat is here. Come, greet him. No response. Reda, he came all the way from Cairo just for you. Still silence. I sat quietly beside him and studied him. He wore a dirty blue galabeah, his head was bare and his eyes held a lost gaze, staring into distances unknown. He hadn't changed much, I could still see my own features in his. But what had happened to him? Reda, don't you recognize me? He didn't seem to hear me, let alone recognize me. I patted his shoulder and turned to his wife, who stood with her hands on her hips. Since when? Since a week ago. And what happened? She lit a kerosene lamp to dispel some of the room's darkness, but it only added gloomy shadows that made the atmosphere more tense. We had gone to sleep. Then I heard a voice calling, Reda, Reda, a woman's voice coming from the southern field. He got up, insisting on seeing what was happening. I told him, it's the Naddaha, Reda. Don't go, Reda. But he insisted on going, and here is the result. And did he come back to you afterward? No. He was gone a long time. I went out alone to the field, carrying the lamp, and found him standing alone, unresponsive. I brought him back home, and ever since that moment he's been like this. And he truly doesn't eat? Practically not. Sometimes I stuff food into his mouth like with children, or like with ducks, and it just stays there untouched for hours. And relieving himself? Right there where he is. Then suddenly and without warning, she burst into tears, her sobs mixing with her words. My husband is lost. He's finished. I wish he hadn't gone. I wish he hadn't heard her. Then she launched into a hysterical rant, cursing him for his foolishness, cursing the circumstances that made him the victim. What should I do? What can I do? The Naddaha. Then she cursed the Naddaha, then even cursed me, though I couldn't tell what my fault was in all of this. But she clearly thought I had some role I couldn't grasp, one worthy of blame. Maybe because she wished it had been me instead of him, that I, with my full mental faculties, was committing an unforgivable crime in her eyes, and I couldn't blame her. Then she began to sob softly, and I sat her down beside Reda, gently patting her arm. How strange this woman was, all these emotions hidden behind her strict, haughty appearance. What am I supposed to do with this heap of flesh he's left behind? The truth was, she was in an unenviable position. My brother was the man of the house in every sense. He did everything and knew everything. Without him, she was completely lost. He's not dead, Nagat. He's not dead. He's as good as dead. He's sick, and he will recover. No, I know the fate of those called by the Naddaha. He'll stay like this for 2 or 3 weeks. Then she'll call him a second time. That's when he'll leave the house for good, and no one will ever see him again. No, that will not happen while I'm alive. No one will ever harm my brother. And I rose with determination, and she, too, seemed to recall something and added, and no harm shall come to my brother's wife as long as I'm alive on this earth. Darkness had fully fallen over the village, and the stars shone brightly in the sky, like holes in a black cloth draped across the universe. Everything had cooled down and taken on a harsh bluish tint, and shadowy faces passed by me, offering greetings. I replied with mixed phrases, my mind elsewhere. What are these symptoms? This picture closely resembles acute reactive depression, or an emotional shock, or perhaps some psychological disorder, I don't know. because I know very little about such conditions. In those blissful days, drugs weren't known in the horrible form we see today, so I ruled that out immediately. Though I couldn't deny the similarity of these symptoms to chronic barbiturate poisoning, my brother wasn't the type to get addicted and was never easily deceived. Could it be some unknown organic illness? Could it be advanced catatonic schizophrenia? Could it be? No. No answer. There's one thing I do know. It's my duty to bring some of my colleagues from the university to examine him, and I'm sure they'll find a Latin term with at least 10 letters to name this illness, and they'll prescribe some pills and injections to bring my brother back to his former self. Yes, I knew exactly what I had to do.